Hello, East End. You're watching East End News on LTV. We hope you enjoyed last week's guest anchors. Today is October 31st. I'm Galen Davey, in for Christine Sampson. This is your community and your news. Today's top story takes a look at just one of the local impacts of the federal government shutdown, which is about to enter its second month. Here's what we know.
In light of the immediate and extraordinary circumstances created by the federal suspension of SNAP benefits, the town board finds it necessary to provide financial support to ensure that local food pantries can continue to meet increased demand for food assistance.
Food pantries in Springs, Montauk, and East Hampton will receive an emergency grant of $10,000 each to help them help others in the community, thanks to a resolution passed by the East Hampton Town Board during a special meeting on Thursday, October 30th. SNAP benefits are also known as food stamps and help vulnerable people at risk of going hungry, including seniors, veterans, disabled people, and working families. Town Supervisor Kathy Burke-Gonzalez had some strong words for the federal government in light of the suspension of the SNAP program set to go into effect on Saturday, November 1st.
The Trump administration made a conscious choice to stop SNAP benefits, not because the money isn't there, but because they chose not to use it. That decision puts seniors, veterans, children, and working families in communities like ours at risk of going hungry. Here in East Hampton, we reject that kind of neglect. We believe in standing up for our neighbors, not turning our backs on them. When families lose that support, it's our local food pantries and their volunteers who shoulder the burden.
Holly Wheaton, director of the Springs Food Pantry, appreciates the emergency funding and said it will help meet demand in the short term.
When I got the call from Supervisor Kathy Burke-Gonzalez, I was elated because, we've been kind of planning for this, but it like all of a sudden hits you in the face. The bottom line is we really feel that our weekly expenses are going to go up by, like $7,000. We're in the Hamptons. People don't think that there is a need out here. It's the home of the rich and famous. So, what, food pantry? Why do they need a food pantry?
In 1 week alone, the Springs Pantry provided food for over 1,300 people. And this is just one corner of East Hampton town. There are also pantries helping in Sag Harbor, Bridgehampton, Southampton, and other places. Helpful phone numbers are listed here.
But we can show what leadership rooted in compassion and community looks like. Where the Trump administration has chosen indifference, East Hampton chooses to care for one another.
This is Christine Sampson reporting from Springs for East End News on LTV.
One way you can help is by donating shelf-stable food items to the little free food pantry boxes stationed at schools and other locations in town. There's one right here at LTV. Or you can donate to food drives, such as the one currently going on at Westhampton. Starting on Monday, November 3rd through November 21st, Westhampton will collect non-perishable food items at its office, 26 Park Place in East Hampton Village, during normal business hours. A new scholarship for high school students has been established by an East Hampton family grieving the loss of a son. In memory of Daniel Leopold Horwath, who died on September 7th at the age of 34, his family has provided a donation to East Hampton High School to create the Daniel Leopold Horwath Memorial Altruism Award. Daniel was a 2009 graduate of East Hampton High School who went on to attend SUNY New Paltz and Albany Law School. He was said to believe in the dignity, worth, and value of fellow humans, and selflessly acted to help others throughout his life. The scholarship will be awarded annually to a high schooler in East Hampton who reflects the same beliefs Daniel held. The school community in Westhampton Beach is celebrating the approval of 2 bond propositions that will enable a slate of significant upgrades and renovations in its schools. On Tuesday, voters in Westhampton said yes to Proposition 1 with a vote tally of 216 to 66. Proposition 2 was approved with a vote tally of 181 to 98. Together, these 2 propositions will enable Westhampton to spend $30 million for security vestibules, safety lighting, redoing the parking lots, adding air conditioning to classrooms, and renovating the high school tennis courts and the elementary school playground. The average yearly cost to a homeowner in that district will be about $165. In a statement, the Westhampton Beach School District said, quote, These improvements will not only benefit students, but also ensure our schools remain safe, secure, and a continued source of pride for the community. In addition to Westhampton, at least 3 other school districts on the South Fork are planning major capital projects, including Montauk, Sag Harbor, and East Hampton. More to come on those proposals. East Hampton Town announced that a key beach protection project has been completed, and it is gearing up to pay its share of the cost. The project is called FIMP. It stands for Fire Island Inlet to Montauk Point, and spans towns from Islip and Babylon all the way to Montauk. Remember the controversial geotextile sandbags installed on town beaches back in 2016? That project paved the way for a full dredging effort to widen and restore the sandy shores that lure visitors by the thousands to East Hampton Town each summer. The dredging work was completed in 2024. Now that it's all done, East Hampton expects to pay $27.6 million over the next 30 years. The overall cost of the FIMP project was $1.7 billion. However, the bulk of the money came from the federal government and New York State together. Officials representing the town, the state, and the nation gathered last Friday to celebrate the signing of the formal agreement. The move was lauded across the board, including by Leo Daunt, president of the Montauk Chamber of Commerce. He called the beaches the heart of our town and our economy, and said that the FIMP gives our community real peace of mind that Montauk's shoreline and everything it supports will be here for future generations. East End News welcomed Town Supervisor Kathy Burke-Gonzalez this week to expand on FIMP and what it means for the town and how it fits in to long-term planning.
You're watching East End News on LTV, East Hampton Town's public access television provider. And now it's time to sit down with the supervisor, Kathy Burke-Gonzalez. Welcome back to Sit Down with the Supervisor. My name is Christy Sampson. I'm an anchor with East End News, and I'm here with East Hampton Town Supervisor Kathy Burke-Gonzalez once again to chat about town happenings. And welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Chrissy. I'm happy to be here again.
Yes, so we talked last month about the budget. Today we're going to talk about FIMP, which is an acronym, Fire Island Inlet to Montauk Project, right? That's
Montauk Point.
Montauk Point. So Fire Island Inlet to Montauk Point is how we get the FIMP, F-I-M-P acronym. Kathy, can you please tell us what it means? It's kind of funny if
Well,
you just say it.
it's a project the Army Corps has been working on since like the 1960s. It's like as old as I am. And it's protecting our beaches and shoreline from Fire Island all along, Babylon to Islip to Southampton to East Hampton to Montauk Point.
Okay, so that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah. So the whole project, right, is a $3.4 billion project. The federal government is putting up half, $1.7 billion. And then the non-federal partners, which are the state and the individual towns, make up the other 50%. So in the town of East Hampton, over the next 30 years, to keep our, economic engine and, the beaches, which is also where people derive so much pleasure, to keep those beaches solid, we need to invest, they're estimating, $184 million. The town's portion of the non-federal share is close to $28 million over 30 years.
Okay, so it's not one big hit all at once.
Right.
It's spread out over 30 years.
Correct.
Is it a matter of is this a preparedness? Are we looking ahead to what we could face?
Right. So, and this is just to buy us the next 30 years, because this isn't forever. We have to come up with another plan for longer term. But this whole project came about, FIMP has been, like I said, since the 1960s. And, where I got involved was first back in 2013 during the Wilkinson administration. The Army Corps was looking at a beach stabilization project. And one of the things they were looking at is groins and rocks and different solutions. And at the time, the town board said, we want you to consider geotextile bags. So then when I got on the board, that's where the Army Corps kind of put its focus. And we had a big vote in November of 2014 2014 to decide, are we going to, if we had to accept the geotextile bags, if we ever wanted to get to the beach nourishment project. And it was supposed to be a temporary, the geotextile bags was a temporary measure. What happened was, that was a really challenging vote because it wasn't very popular with some folks putting bags on the beach because of citing examples in other coastal communities along the East Coast. But, the downtown Montauk Beach is the epicenter for Montauk, and it is a huge driver of our economy. And, we saw what happened after Superstorm Sandy, and that wasn't a direct hit to us, right? We saw the foundations of hotels along that dune exposed, and we felt we needed to protect the downtown. We have one grocery store. We only have a couple of gas stations, banks. Our lines are buried under the ground. So the board felt at the time that we needed to take on this project with the geotextile bags. So that project, as I said, got approved in November of 2014, and it got completed in January of 2016. But as you recall,
In between, there was a hullabaloo there.
correct, when the bulldozer showed up because they needed to cut into the dunes in order to lay the geotextile bags, people, freaked out.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of folks going down there and linking arms and not wanting the work
Civil
to be done.
disobedience.
Exactly.
They maybe just didn't understand what the order of events was going to be.
Yeah, and I just think, when you see a machine that's going to cut into a primary dune that has been there forever, it's a protection. It was, worrisome for folks. But, we signed on to that project. It got completed. And then the beach nourishment project, which took place in February of 2024, took longer. It was supposed to be temporary, couple of years. It was more like 8 years. But that got completed. And I know, when that was happening back in February of 2024, a lot of community members came down, and it was extraordinary to watch the sand being dredged offshore, coming on, and then the equipment moving the sand around and placing it on the beaches, and then then they came in with the plugs for the beach grass, and now it's a year and a half later, and the beach grass is thriving. It's really grown in, and it looks great.
Our full interview with the supervisor can be viewed on the LTV YouTube channel. And speaking of Montauk, today's edition of Keeping It Real with Mike Daly addresses real estate trends on the end. Thanks to Douglas Elliman Real Estate for sponsoring this segment. Let's take a look.
Good day, and welcome to Keeping It Real with Mike Daly. This is real talk about real estate, so let's get going. Today we're going to talk about our beloved Montauk, right? The end, the lighthouse, beautiful beaches, surfing, fishing, boating, great restaurants, sunrises, sunsets. Montauk has it all, right? But this fishing, surfing, summer hotspot surely has changed over the years. Many of the fishermen's and surfers' cottages have been lost to larger and more luxurious development. Here's a look at what one of our love it or hate it Zillow tells us is happening today in real estate. A typical home is near $2 million, up 4% from the same time in 2024, right? And they've almost doubled in the last 6 years. But the fact that many of the smaller local homes are being bought and rebuilt is pushing the average sales price up. So here's what Zillow has as for sale in Montauk. Right now Zillow is notorious for having homes listed for sale when they're really not, right? So many times agents will leave them on Zillow in hopes that someone will call them and then they can direct them to another house. So here are the homes that Zillow has under $1 million that have sold in the last 2 years. You see all those yellow dots? The next slide will show all of the homes that have sold over $1 million in about the last 2 years. Now, that's really good news for property owners who have or are selling. After all, our homes are historically one of our biggest investments, right? It's not a problem for well-heeled, well-capitalized investors or home buyers, too, who are selling a home somewhere else and looking to make Montauk their new home. But it's really challenging for young people. So now if you go to multiple listing service, okay, the database that all Long Island agents are supposed to use for listings, this is what you find as available on the market. Why are there so few? Because East End agents, especially on the South Fork, east of the Shinnecock Inlet, don't like to use MLS. Why? Because all Long Island agents have access to MLS, and that means that Myrtle from Medford or Paul from Patchogue can call you up and bring their buyer. East End agents like to keep exclusive control of their listings to increase the likelihood that the buyer will have to come to them. Here's the listings marked as sold on MLS. So there's a little bit more data in there that's accurate. And then here's the results from Out East, which is another listing database that is used for East End real estate. It shows 222 homes for sale in Montauk, and that's really unlikely. I also wanted to talk about mortgages today. Mortgage rates have come down slightly to about the 1% area, about 1%, okay? And what that does is that's changed the math a little bit. It's a hair more affordable for some, but still too high for many buyers. So I used 850,000 as the example, that there are, not that there are many homes at 850,000, about 10% of the listings on the East End, especially the South Fork, are under $1 million. But at 850, you'll want to put down 20% to avoid PMI, which is mortgage insurance. You'll need to closer to 200,000 to pay for your down payment, mortgage fees, attorney's fees, and the Peconic preservation and housing tax. Okay? Let's say that your taxes are about $6,000 a year, which is 1/2 to 1/3 of what you'd pay in Nassau County or Western Suffolk, and about $2,000 in home insurance, which is possible. Maybe a little low, especially if you're on the water, right? But that brings your monthly housing expense to nearly $5,000 a month. When you compare that to renting, which has also exploded in terms of price and cost and a lack of availability since COVID, if you can find that house for $850, are you better off owning? Well, one benefit is that you're more secure in your own house, rather than being left to the whims of a landlord who might decide to either sell the property that you're living in or raise your rent, or maybe try to turn you into a winter tenant because they want to get the premium for summer rental. I mean, it's complicated, and it's challenging renting a house out in this market. But the benefit also you get from buying is you'll get that mortgage interest rate deduction on your taxes. So what's best for you? As always, find an experienced professional you can trust to help you reach your real estate goals, whether it be buying, selling, or leasing. Someone who will keep it real for you.
We go now to our community calendar to learn about fun events happening around the South Fork.
At the Sag Harbor Cinema, an ongoing run of Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere runs through November 6th. The film stars Jeremy Allen White as the boss himself and features Springsteen's iconic songs. The website for tickets and times is sagharborcinema.org. At the YMCA East Hampton Rec Center, registration for late fall programs begins on Monday, November 3rd. Adults, teens, and kids can sign up for activities, swim lessons, fitness classes, and more. The YMCA website has full details. For young adults in need of community service hours for school, the East Hampton Library will host an afternoon of card making to thank veterans for their service. Gather in the downstairs teen room from 4 to 5 p.m. on Tuesday, November 4th to take part in this meaningful activity. On Thursday, November 6th, the East End Library Collective will host a Jane Austen expert, Erin Coughlin, to talk about the author's universal influence over literature and culture. The talk is from 7 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. The phone number for registration is 631-298-4134. And finally, on Saturday, November 8th, Guildhall will host another edition of the Met Opera Live series. This time the show is La Boheme, presented from 1 to 5 p.m. with 2 intermissions. Guildhall.org has the full details.
For this week's edition of Inside the Archives, we reflected on a recent holiday known as Indigenous Peoples Day. Here's a thoughtful take on the Native community, straight from the LTV archives.
Inside the Archive is our weekly look back in time, thanks to the East Hampton Library's Digital Long Island collection. In observation of Indigenous Peoples Day on October 13th, we celebrate the Native American communities in the East End. Long Island currently recognizes 2 Native American tribes, the Shinnecock Nation and the Unkachog Nation. The Shinnecock Indian Nation, which once oversaw Southampton, faced centuries of oppression after European settlers came to Long Island in the 1600s. Having their land and rights stripped from them as the years went on, the great tribes stuck together and continued to persevere.
It's the one place that the Indians held most dear, and it became the central jewel of their reservation from 1703 up until 1859, when the state and the town decided to take it from the Indians. It's one of the most stringent points made in tribal talk about the hills, and the hills are sacred, and we know that these very grounds hold the earthly remains of our ancestors.
It is said that the Shinnecock people have been here on this land since before 1043 BC, so our people have always been here.
Now, the nation continues to advocate for their community and the protection of their land. Traditions continue within the community with public celebrations such as the annual Shinnecock Powwow held every September, where the nation gathers to share their unique traditions, arts, and skills with the public. For East End News, I'm Lisbeth Leone.
Here's a shout out to one of East Hampton Town's hundreds of hardworking employees. The town announced this week that Steve O'Brien, the maintenance supervisor, has received a Safety Champion Award from the Public Employer Risk Management Association. O'Brien was recognized for his efforts and supervision to keep town facilities safe, functional, and welcoming to all. Town Administrator Rebecca Hansen nominated O'Brien for the award. In a statement, she said, "Steve does all of this with a smile on his face and a willingness to help. The town is very fortunate to have him on staff." This just in, the Southampton Town Police Department announced Friday morning that the heavy rainfall from the Thursday night storm has caused erosion issues impacting Sunrise Highway in the vicinity of the Shinnecock Canal. One westbound lane is expected to be closed as the New York State Department of Transportation evaluates and completes emergency repairs. In a statement, the police department acknowledged it expects significant delays as a result. Officials said in a statement that the reduced capacity of Sunrise Highway westbound is expected to remain a concern for the immediate future, but the state is working as quickly as possible to address the issue. We have one more shout out on this week's episode of East End News. To our LTV volunteers and interns who help out behind the scenes to not only make our TV news show run smoothly, but also they help all of the LTV's events to be successful, from concerts and plays to art shows and film screenings. Our volunteers rock, and we are so grateful for their generous spirit as they help this tiny nonprofit organization carry out a very big mission. Thanks for watching this week's episode of East End News on LTV. We bring you hyper-local headlines through the power of public access television. See you next week.